Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Age of Capital, 1848 to 1875, by Eric Hobsbawm. Narrated by Hugh Kermode.
Introduction. In the 1860s, a new word entered the economic and political vocabulary of the world: capitalism. It therefore seems apposite to call the present volume The Age of Capital, a title which also reminds us that the major work of capitalism's most formidable critic, Karl Marx's Das Kapital, 1867, was published in these years. For the global triumph of capitalism is the major theme of history in the decades after 1848. It was the triumph of a society which believed that economic growth rested on competitive private enterprise, on success in buying everything in the cheapest market, including labour, and selling in the dearest. An economy so based, and therefore resting naturally on the sound foundations of a bourgeoisie composed of those whom energy, merit, and intelligence had raised to their position and kept there, would, it was believed, not only create a world of suitably distributed material plenty, but of ever-growing enlightenment, reason, and human opportunity, an advance of the sciences and the arts, in brief, a world of continuous and accelerating material and moral progress. The few remaining obstacles in the way of the untrammelled development of private enterprise would be swept away. The institutions of the world, or rather of those parts of the world not still debarred by the tyranny of tradition and superstition, or by the unfortunate fact of not having white skins, preferably originating in the central and northwestern parts of Europe, would gradually approximate to the international model of a territorially defined nation-state, with a constitution guaranteeing property and civil rights, elected representative assemblies and governments responsible to them, and, where suitable, a participation in politics of the common people within such limits as would guarantee the bourgeois social order and avoid the risk of its overthrow. To trace the earlier development of this society is not the business of the present book. It is enough to remind ourselves that it had already achieved, as it were, its historical breakthrough on both the economic and politico-ideological fronts in the 60 years before 1848. The years from 1789 to 1848 were dominated by a dual revolution: the industrial transformation pioneered in and largely confined to Britain, and the political transformation associated with and largely confined to France. Both implied the triumph of a new society, but whether it was to be the society of triumphant liberal capitalism, of what a French historian has called the conquering bourgeois, still seemed more uncertain to contemporaries than it seems to us. Behind the bourgeois political ideologists stood the masses, ready to turn moderate liberal revolutions into social ones. Below and around the capitalist entrepreneurs, the discontented and displaced labouring poor stirred and surged. The 1830s and 1840s were an era of crisis, whose exact outcome only optimists cared to predict. Still, the dualism of the revolution of 1789 to 1848 gives the history of that period both unity and symmetry. It is in a sense easy to write and read about, because it appears to possess a clear theme and a clear shape, and its chronological limits are as clearly defined as we have any right to expect in human affairs. With the revolution of 1848, which forms the starting point of this book, the earlier symmetry broke down, the shape changed, political revolution retreated, industrial revolution advanced. 1848, the famous springtime of peoples, was the first and last European revolution in the almost literal sense. The momentary realization of the dreams of the left, the nightmares of the right, the virtually simultaneous overthrow of old regimes over the bulk of continental Europe, west of the Russian and Turkish empires, from Copenhagen to Palermo, from Brasov to Barcelona. It had been expected and predicted. It seemed to be the culmination and logical product of the era of dual revolution. It failed, universally, rapidly, and, though this was not realized for several years by the political refugees, definitively. Henceforth there was to be no general social revolution of the kind envisaged before 1848 in the advanced countries of the world. The centre of gravity of such social revolutionary movements, and therefore of 20th century socialist and communist regimes,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?